Greetings. This is Griff Ruby, the Nostalgic Catholic, here to talk about and somewhat review the third story of Isaac Asimov's To Meet the Reading Public, and also the first one to appear on the pages of Astounding Science Fiction. Get more astounding than that. You'll notice in this one case, I regret to inform you by looking that I don't actually have the magazine itself. All I have are a few relevant pictures of the magazine. This shows the cover. As you can see, the first time he does make his appearance in there. Now, obviously somebody else is in their story, Black Destroy by A.E. Van Vogt, which is of course another classic story, a significant classic, is stories from that period go. And I don't see any other names. Takes up the cover. So, as mentioned, a couple others on the edge. Lester Del Rey, Ray Cummings, and also a few others I've seen there. And we're now looking at July 1939, so that's pretty cool. Astounding Science Fiction. Well, his first story to appear on the pages of Astounding Science Fiction. He'd actually written this one, and I think sold it as well, before the one that appeared in the May issue of Amazing. So, but it took however long it took before it's like, okay, we got room for the story, here it goes. So, we might as well cover the quick stuff first. As it turns out, the way it appears in the magazine does not differ very much at all from the way it appears as published ever since. So what do you find? Well, in the table of contents, it's there. You see it. Trends, page 33, and it reads, okay, it may not be mechanical faults that stop men from reaching the skies. It may be human trends. You see, Asimov was originally going to call it Ad Astra, to the stars, as part of the whole saying, Ad Astra per Aspera, through the struggles to the stars. And so that was what he was supposed to. But John Campbell decided to change the name of the story to Trends. So, the other thing that would be missing, of course, would be the artwork. So it was to have the artwork. What you see happening here is a rocket ship on the ground exploding, and unfortunately a lot of and I think I can say he said foolish people, and foolish description of who they are, were way too close. A bunch of them got killed, many others injured. I don't know if this guy facing the wrong way may have been running away, having some idea of the danger, because he knew the explosion coming. There's a saboteur. The main cover for it really doesn't have very much at all. Has a little squib. Oh, he does introduce it here. Let me say, a new author. New to the pages of Astounding, that's for sure. And new for the year, I should say. Okay. A new author presents a new type of obstacle that may face the first rocket ship's inventor. The minds of men did not always run as they do now. By Isaac Asimov, illustrated by Orban. Well, Orban may be a great illustrator, but the one other illustration seen in the story, near the end, shows a picture of a guy in a spacesuit, and that's probably how they would have seen the moon. So I guess the idea that's supposed to be somebody on the moon. Not quite. Since the spaceship that blew up really was meant to go on the moon, and apparently there was supposed to be a walking on the moon, as a brief mention of checking out a spacesuit before launch, or what was supposed to be launched instead of the explosion that happened instead. So obviously some sort of lunar excursion had been originally intended. Once that explosion has, somehow the guy on board the rocket survives, which is a lot more than can be said for a lot of people nearby. Including he said to his police officer, "Hey, have the people move back, because even if it just worked normally, you don't want to be near this thing." And obviously, if it blows up or something goes wrong and it blows up, which in fact is what happens, you definitely don't want to be near this thing. But they're just standing around, crowding around, and we'll get to that in a moment. Why are they doing it? Well, this kind of shows probably one of the preeminent examples of where Asimov never really understood religious faith. He just didn't understand it. I mean, it's definitely described from the outside. Suddenly, everybody willing to say, going into space, that's an abomination. Really? Really? I don't think you could find even any peculiar sect that would say such a thing, let alone some way for all of them to just join together and say, and brotherly ecumenism and say, we're all opposed, everybody, Catholic, Protestant, Jew, Buddhist, everybody, all joining in arms and hands saying, no, don't go to orbit, you're calling the judgment of God, you're calling the wrath of God, for trying to shoot a rocket into space. I find that irrational. I don't know. There are some people for whom, I guess, any kind of interference from religion, people can use religion to create twisted science. I won't go into specific examples, but we've seen it done. It's not what religion was supposed to be about, but it is something that regrettably is going to happen sometimes. But that's not anything intrinsic about religion. It's just something that, when something's that important and it guides the people, how to live and things like that, sometimes people don't want to really live how it calls for. So you say, well, they'll water little bits of it down, and then if it gets too watered down, now you have to bring something else in artificial to make it harder. But is there any real interaction? Okay, there is. Let's deal with that. I think that I would, as a religious person, the nostalgic Catholic after all, but I think I could speak for almost anybody of any known religious persuasion, just about anything you possibly think of, that I would find it very objectionable if somebody found a way to cross a human with a pig and get some weird creature that's in between. What have we created if we actually succeed in that? Or think of all the medical experiments done in the Nazi concentration camps, or the equivalent one the Japanese had in China, built out 774, some number, some building where it was just, they were competing with they rivaled the Germans in their sheer frightful horror of what they were doing there. And it was just, all in the name of medical science. But I don't see that they were investigating anything other than just cooking up new ways to torture people, kill them. So, doesn't religion have something to say here? Of course it does. Things of that sort are unethical. And it says so. And if you have a faint trace of some vague feeling that there's a larger truth, however vague that might be, that you specifically believe in God, God is in the Bible, and Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and all that, like to be as a Catholic, or even if your notions of God or ethics are much more vague as it might be, say, for a Buddhist, there's got to be something that just objects and says, this is just wildly wrong. So there are limitations, but there are limitations that arise out of moral considerations, not just, we think it's bad to go up into the sky. Even in the days when you could find people who would say, well, if man were meant to fly, he'd have wings. They weren't saying don't do it like it's evil. They were just saying it'll never work. Which for the longest time, efforts of that sort didn't work. We'd all know the famous tower jumpers who, I always say for tower jumpers, you want to try flying, take off from the ground. If you can't take off the ground, don't expect to figure out how to fly halfway down, falling from the top of the cliff. It won't work, or tower, or whatever. That's a fine time to discover. Wait a minute, these wings don't work. So what happened with this story? Basically, this kind of fanaticism gets in the way of just launching a rocket to the moon. And he really drops into all this detailed discussion about these groups of propagandists, very weird religious propaganda, and then a lot about Congress and even Supreme Court, and 4 out of 5 justices weren't quite enough to say it's okay to do science. I don't see how that's ever possible. Human beings are always reaching out for more. And even if there's just got to be some places you should draw the line. I mean, I draw the line at stuff that would, basically either be cruel or unusual or something that kills people. Although I guess in the development of weapons, that's kind of, I don't know. That's another whole thing to follow. But we're talking like weapons, like bigger bombs, like the nuclear bombs. Okay, I mean, yeah, you could use those to make caves or something, but face it, they were invented in war to blow up cities all in one fell swoop. So the story then really hinges on that. So what happens is he's building this first rocket ship. This guy, John Harmon. Yes. John Harmon's building the story, building this rocket ship. He's got all these people working with him. He's able to get some funding from some group of scientists, and he's getting ready to launch this thing. Only among all those working for him is a traitor who basically causes the rocket to blow up when it tries to take off. And the traitor gets seriously injured and dies minutes later. But at least I did it. I kept it from playing. Ooh. Okay, whatever. So he ends up having to go into hiding. I mean, people did die. He warned them to stay away, so they really couldn't blame him. And they didn't. And why were they around? To send it off? Oh, let's watch this exciting thing happen. They were all there to condemn him. Don't do this. Stop this abomination. You're going to call the judgment of God upon yourself, the wrath of God. Well, I guess in a way, kind of, but not so much himself as on the crowds that were stupid enough to come near to anything obviously dangerous and anything which he obviously warned everybody, stand way, way back. I mean, he told them that, but they weren't interested. They weren't going to listen. So he, after explosion, he moves to a hidden place in Minnesota, of all places, and with his own private money, sets up a second flight. This one's going to be done in secrecy. Here's the idea. People get kind of tired of this whole thing. There's this big pendulum that swings back and forth between fanaticism and rationality or something. Mindless fanaticism. I don't know. I have seen mindless fanaticism these days. They don't dress it up as a religion because there just aren't enough religious people interested in being mindless fanatics. But you could sure find a lot of irreligious folks who are very happy to be mindless fanatics, usually in the name of things like communism or socialism or something. I mean, I don't see how you can support this without being a mindless fanatic. I'm sorry, but I consider people of that sort illiterates. Because if they actually entered into the world of argumentation, looked into these things, they would say, "Oh my God, how could I have been so dumb?" How indeed. Well, ignorance is amazing. And, well, I was ignorant once, though, very long time ago, as a kid. Well, so, ignorance, it's always around. I don't think you can stop it. Yeah. But at any rate, there's the pendulum. So after 5 years later, he's actually built this spaceship. People are kind of starting to get tired of seeing every bit of science, and not just flying into the skies, but every kind of scientific endeavor clamped down, and virtually nothing can take place unless some special body says, "Okay, we want this to be investigated," or be something just brute practical, technical more than anything else. And then that's the only research that's allowed to exist at all. Okay. So he does this all in secret. People get tired of that. And he says, well, all I have to do is come back. Make it out there, come back. Now, his second flight is much too limited. He can't handle trying to land on the moon. He can't even so much as afford a spacesuit to get out and walk around. But he can still go around, see the backside of the moon, take a picture or some number of pictures of the backside of the moon, and then come back. And hopefully make it back alive, which he does. And because of the success of this trip, somehow all this other fanaticism just shows he made it. Nothing went wrong, and he even showed people things they didn't know before. I mean, a picture of the backside of the moon, which is in a way interesting. I mean, originally we wanted to get a man to the moon somehow. We want to get him there, right? There's a line from the Earth and the Moon. Just get him there. Get him now. Just put him on the moon, okay? And then we'll just keep sending supplies there to keep him fed until we figure out a way to bring him back. and the guy looks at that from the other guy in the room looks at that and says, no, there's no way we'll ever do anything like that. So, but when it actually came to going to the moon, what did we first do? We went in orbit around the moon, Apollo 8, and then later on comes going on the moon, that's 11 through 17. So, in a way, that's beautifully prophetic. But the fanaticism didn't exist, doesn't exist, that says, oh, you can't go into outer space. That fanaticism didn't exist, doesn't exist. And it's kind of funny. He says this thing in the 1970s. That big explosion is 1973. His successful flight is 1978. Well, even those years have been and gone. And I think that covers all. So the picture there of the man with a spacesuit on the moon it's either the dream or the plan, or it's a mistake. So that's what there is to the story. Like I said, it definitely has some interesting features, but his portrayal of religion is, like I said, the way somebody who's never seen a religious person would explain it. And strangely enough, his perception of it doesn't really seem to change at any point in his whole life. Even though he writes a whole guide to the Bible, whole long stories of ancient history, which had to at least make some mention of the beliefs of the people, various peoples he's describing. And in all of that, he never once seems to convey the slightest idea of what it would actually be like. Just seriously believe that there are things that are true and there are things that are false, and not merely because people happen to like them or not like them on part of large numbers of people. So that's it. That's what I have to say on trends. And well, it'll be a while before we get the next Astounding Science Fiction, but we'll get there.